Gossip, the stairway to hell. The A-ranked adventuring party ARC made their way into the Roncanen branch of the Adventurers Guild. They'd made a name for themselves in the region as of late, and the other adventurers present in the guild cleared a path as they stepped up to the counter, their exhaustion plain to see upon their faces. A-ranked party ARC, reporting in, said Gadino, the group's leader. Sorry for the hassle, but could you call the guild master over? We need to talk. Of course, said the receptionist, who recognized the party immediately and set out to find the guild master. Course, whether or not he'll believe the story's a whole different question, Gideon muttered tiredly under his breath. Doesn't matter one way or the other for us. We just have to tell him what we saw, and that'll be the end of it, Sigvard said. He was usually the party's heartiest member, but even he sounded haggard and worn out. Sigvard's right. We're here to report what we saw and experienced down there, and nothing more. Oh, and also that Mukouda and his familiars were there with us. Hopefully that'll make us sound at least a little more credible, Gadino quietly replied. He'd endured more anxiety than anyone over the course of ARC's recent endeavor, and you could hear it in his voice. The guild already knows that we're acquainted with him, Theodora noted. Normally, she would have made for the dining hall the instant she set foot in the guild. On any other day, her appetite would have won out above all else, but her expression was deeply colored by fatigue as well, and this time, she refrained. While ARC's members chatted with one another, the guild master, Orson, stepped into the room. Well, if it isn't the good people of ARC, he said. I'm told you have something to speak with me about. That's right, Gadino said. Well then, right this way, Orson said, noting how bedraggled ARC's members looked as he led them into his office. The air in the guildmaster's office was heavy. Orson sat in an elegant, curved-legged chair, with Gadino and Sigvard sitting in similar chairs opposite from him. Gideon and Theodora were sitting beside them in simpler wooden chairs that the guild staff had hauled in for them. The staff had also brought tea, which everyone present sipped in a moment of calm and silence before Orson kicked off the conversation. So then, he said, what did you want to talk with me about? ARC's members paused, unsure of where to start. Eventually, Gadino stepped up as their leader and began to explain, his tone grave. We've cleared a dungeon located in the border states, he said. You've? Huh? Orson grunted with less dignity than he would have preferred to present. He was simply too taken aback by the sudden claim to help himself. I imagine you were already aware that there's a dungeon in the wilds to the northwest of this city, across the border? Gadino asked. Orson plumbed the depths of his memory. Finally, he managed to grasp something, a conversation he'd had only in passing about a dungeon that fit that description, all the way back when he'd first assumed his position as the head of the branch. That does ring a bell, yes, Orson said. I was under the impression that it was mostly untouched, given where it's located. That's the one, and you're right about it being almost untouched. We managed to clear it, though, and this should be enough to prove it, Gadino said before bringing out the magic bag he'd received from Mukouda and presenting a number of the drops they'd obtained in the dungeon, while Theodora supplemented the haul with drops she'd been keeping in her item box. They brought out a red-tailed caiman skin, a blue otter pelt, neon budgie feathers, a ceta skin, and their party's greatest spoils from the whole venture, excepting the magic bag itself, a sea serpent's fangs and magic stone. Orson found himself unable to hide his shock as Gadino and Theodora produced item after item. Gee goodness, he exclaimed. Each and every one of the items they'd presented was precious and valuable in its own right. Moreover, they were items that would normally be impossible to acquire anywhere near Roncanen, and yet there they were, right in front of him, with more to be found in the dungeon they came from. It might have been located across a border, but it was by no means unreachable from Roncanen. In the best case, Orson knew this could mean that his city had just found a new source of high-quality materials. Images of how his branch could expand and develop thanks to this newfound windfall flashed through his mind, and he began growing more and more excited, but the faces of ARC's members, in contrast, were grim. They knew painfully well that it wouldn't be as simple, or as pleasant, as Orson was hoping. If materials like these can be gathered in that dungeon, We need to issue an announcement about it at once, Orson exclaimed. Just a minute, Gadino said, raising a hand to quell Orson's excitement. Yes, that dungeon's full of monsters that drop valuable items. Even knowing that, though, there's no chance in hell that I'll ever be setting foot in that place again. I'm with the boss on that, Gideon said. Doesn't matter how profitable a dungeon is if you don't live to come back and spend the spoils. I can't imagine us going through that pit and coming back alive and well, Sigvard added. We'd just die, Theodora concluded. Those words carried great weight coming from a party of A-ranked adventurers. Orson stiffened up as the fact that he wasn't in for the windfall he'd been hoping for sank in. The fact of the matter is that we were only able to clear the dungeon at all because Mukouda was there with us, Gadino explained. His party members nodded in agreement. Mukouda the S-ranker, yes? Orson said. Come to think of it, I do remember hearing that you were friends of his. Right. That's how we ended up going into the dungeon with him, and I can say for a fact that if we'd tried it on our own, we wouldn't have lived to tell the tale. With that preamble out of the way, ARC's members began to describe the dungeon. They told Orson about the nature of its flaws, the monsters they'd encountered, and how they'd dealt with its various challenges, sparing no details. Orson let out a long, heavy sigh. A vast marshland followed by a boundless ocean? Really, he groaned. An S-ranked adventurer might stand a chance of getting through the first floor, though it'd take an age for them to do it, Gadino said. But then they'd hit the second floor and run straight into the ocean. You'd need a ship capable of sailing the high seas to get through there, no two ways about it. And even if you managed to pull that off, the floor's still lousy with monsters. Most likely, you'd be shipwrecked before you knew it, Gideon added. If you're lucky, Sigvard said. More likely, you'd take one look at that ocean and pass out from shock. And your only choices are carrying on in spite of everything, or turning round and heading back to the surface, which means going all the way back through that damn first-floor swamp. You'd be in for a literal hell, whether you go forward or back. Guess we do have a real stairway to hell on our hands, when you put it that way, ha ha ha. Gideon chuckled. That's too true for me to laugh about it, Sigvard said with a scowl. Calling it hell is no exaggeration. An average adventurer stands no chance in that dungeon. They'd die for nothing, Theodora added. There was a sense of urgency in her tone that was very rare for her. If I'm gonna be completely honest, I think that Mukouda's gang might just be the only party out there that stands a chance in that place. Well, unless there's some other adventurer running around with a Fenrir and an ancient dragon at their beck and call, or some familiar that's at least as strong as those, Gadino said with a sigh. Once again, his whole party nodded in agreement. How else would you deal with the likes of Charybdises and Leviathans? You're forgetting about the assassin jaguars on the first floor, Gideon. Most parties would be brought down then and there. Sigvard's right. They'd die before they reached the ocean, Theodora pointed out. Right. Sigvard and Gideon sighed in unison. Meanwhile, Orson's eye had taken on a noticeable twitch. Most of the monster names ARC's members had been throwing around were the stuff of fairy tales. Are you really telling me that you saw a Charybdis and a Leviathan? He asked. I mean, I understand why you'd feel the need to question that, but it really is true, Gadino said. What would we even get out of lying about it? Gideon added. Goes without saying that Mukouda and his crew were the ones that beat him, of course, Sigvard noted. They got the drops too, Theodora concluded. I see, Orson said. If you need to verify any of this, Mukouda said he'd be heading back to Carolina, where he lives. Why not ask the guild over there to handle the confirmation? Gadino suggested. I'll do just that, Orson replied. While we're on the subject, I should note that I'm telling you about all of this out of obligation, Gadino continued. If you want my personal opinion, I don't think that any information about that dungeon should be publicized. Same, Gideon said. Agreed, Sigvard added. Me too. And Theodora made it unanimous. Having experienced the dungeon, ARC's members were of one mind when it came to the idea of sending any other hapless adventurers into it. Though of course, that's the guild's call to make, Gadino said. Can't imagine one party's opinion is going to do much to change their minds. If you do put word out about that dungeon, though, you'd better be ready for none of the parties who try to explore it to ever come back again. With those parting words, Gadino and his party members left the room, then departed from the Adventurers Guild as well. As they walked away, Gideon struck up a conversation. Think they'll release the info anyway? He asked. Hard to say, Gadino said. We did what we could to stop them, at the very least. True. It's out of our hands now, Sigvard stated. That Leviathan at the end, though? Nearly scared the life out of me, I swear. I hate to admit it, but I passed out on the spot, Gideon said. Same, Gadino agreed. That makes 3 of us. Never thought a Leviathan would be that big, Sigvard added. I passed out too, but I don't think anyone would blame us for that, Theodora said. The party glanced at each other and exchanged understanding nods. You know, for a while there, I was actually thinking that it might be fun to stick with Mukouda for a little longer. Felt like we'd reap some serious profits, at least, Gideon said. I can't say I didn't have the same thought, Gadino admitted. Me as well, Sigvard said. And me. We'd get to keep eating great food, above all else, Theodora noted. But boy, did I ever give up on that idea the moment I saw the Leviathan, Gideon continued. Again, me as well, Sigvard said. Doesn't matter how much we might profit, if sticking with him means taking on beasts like that, I'll take what we have now any day of the week. And I don't think the Fenrir or the ancient dragon would save us if we ended up in danger, Theodora added. It really didn't seem like those 2 care about anyone other than Mukouda. Felt like they saw us as insects, at most, Gadino said. His insight, in this case, was right on the mark. When all was said and done, Felongan had no interest in any humans other than Mukouda. Guess we're back to scraping and saving like we always have, then. Can't complain. Feels like this is just the way to do it, Gideon said. Certainly suits us the best, Sigvard agreed. It's hard to give up all that good food, but nothing beats staying safe. I'd never see my grandchild again if I died, so I can't let that happen, Theodora added. Heh. Yeah. True enough, Gadino finished. Just a few days later, the Adventurers Guild formally decided to refrain from publicizing the existence of the dungeon across the border.